So it is my extreme pleasure to welcome to this auditorium, to this discussion, Mr. Luc Tuymans from Antwerp. I think you can meet each speaker with applause. I think I hardly need to present Mr. Luc Tuymans, as majority of you know him and his works very well. And as we were joking some time ago in Vilnius Art Academy, he had plenty of daughters and sons among contemporary painters in Lithuania and elsewhere. So, which is a good thing, I think, good influence. But this is the fact. And now you want to welcome one of the best-known Croatian contemporary artists, Zlatko Kopljar. And those two artists curated and invited together by curator, brilliant curator, Dessau. Who is Israeli by origin, meaning very close to us Lithuanians. Yeah, almost our brother, but lives in Belgium at the moment, in Ghent. A beautiful city. So these are the speakers, including me. I will not be curating, I'm only welcoming those gentlemen. Sorry for no ladies, but it's not intentional, it's just as it is. And now, Ori, the floor is yours, please. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Arūnas. Thank you, Galerija VARTAI, and thank you all for coming. I would like to start with another exhibition, though we are welcoming the audience to our opening tomorrow. I would like to start with an exhibition that Luc Tuymans curated in 2010 in 6 different locations in the city of Bruges. The exhibition shed a light on the Central and Eastern European contemporary art scenes. It also included an exhibition, an installation by Zlatko Kopljar. And I would like to address the first question to Luc. What is your perspective? Did your perspective about Eastern European and Central European art changed in the course of the last 12 years and in the context of the war in Ukraine?
That's a big question, of course. I have to say that the situation with when I did the show in Bruges, there was this kind of very denigrating idea about what Eastern Europe was like from Central Europe. And to give an idea, the poster of it was also a show that was combined with the show in the Museum of Fine Arts, where you have Van Eyck and Dürer. So they made a photograph of me with some kind of like Eastern European looking guys with a van who was half broken with a painting of Dürer and Van Eyck. And I said, no, that's not it. So because out of my own experience, of course, I know that there was an avant-garde, in Eastern Europe, which was really important. Stravinsky, Cobra, Wróblewski, Alina Shaposhnikov. Those were the things I brought for the first time to the West, before they also actually was shown in the MoMA and so on and so on. So it was a very emotional exhibition. And as a leitmotif, I actually took a quote from Cantor, which is the reality of the lowest rank, which goes back to a speech that he got. He got a prize in Amsterdam in 1978, which was an enormous, a very poignant speech. And we also showed the dead class and things like that. So in a sense, what is happening right now is not that surprising, in a sense, if you understand. Also going back more than 15, 16 years ago, when Georgi Konrad, Pistoletto, me, Rem Koolhaas, and many others were invited to give Europe a new narrative, for example, which I said, what do you mean? Culture? It's a bit too late. But I also said, in order to do something before you disperse, you have to focus. And if you have your new member states, you have to know their history. So we're at this point now, which is quite a paradoxical point in a sense, yeah. I don't know if that answers your question, but...
It starts to answer the question. What do you mean by paradoxical?
That things can be foreseen. I mean, if you're less, how do you call it, convoluted and sort of like take things into account. But of course, culture is always a very difficult situation when you mostly have to deal with technocrats. You know? So it's an underestimated element, and you can see now where that leads to what kind of delusion it actually leads.
Zlatko, I would like to ask you about a specific work that we show in Galerija VARTAI. The title of the work is K15. You did it in 2012. And there you reenact the kneeling down of Willy Brandt, then the Chancellor of West Germany, in front of the memorial in the commemorating the Ghetto Warsaw Uprising. You go back to a specific moment in history that somehow combines two points in time, also the history of the Second World War and the annihilation of the European Jews and Polish Jews in particular, the moment where Willy Brandt was kneeling down, the moment you did it, which was 2012, and the moment now you show it. So there are 4 time zones somehow, which are overlapping in the exhibition, which stem from a very specific event. And can you elaborate more about what was the point of departure?
Well, from this position, I can just, as all we can, watch and see, is that work anymore, And it seems to me that still it works. Why? Because I think that I am personally, but I think that all we are even more and deeper with such questions where we don't have definitive answers, coming to the recent situation where we really don't know how all this mess will finish, or it will finish is just a beginning of something even worse, etc., etc. We can think in this or the other way, etc. We can speculate and everything, but if Fukuyama doesn't know, what should I say, And I can just speculate together with you and hope that everything in this or the other way will be fine. And also knowing from our personal history in, let's call it Balkans, where we had a war, in smaller scale, I would say, but with like based on quite the same philosophy, if I can call it philosophy, or a lie, yeah. We know down there, that justice doesn't exist, and that's failure is something, unfortunately, failure is something that, and older I am, I see that personally, and also like watching the society, it's kind of something that I have to accept, And now, turning back to this work is that, that was my first show in Germany, I had 2, okay? So, but that was the first one. And, I was thinking, okay, I'm going to Germany, and should I make work, which would like to say something totally positive, and to remind us about something which is totally unique. So I remembered Willy Brandt, I remember all that, and I connected all that story, and also the gallerist, she was from Poland, and in that time I was reading a lot, Gombrowicz, etc. So altogether, it was totally clear that, and also, deriving from my previous work, like K9, Compassion, I simply, it was totally logical to make such a I found all the footages on YouTube, and I tried I didn't want to reinterpret. I thought, the only way you can make it is to reenact it, So it's almost 100% reenactment, just that everything is happening by night, which is also kind of tricky, yeah.
Yeah, if I could step in a little bit. I wasn't in Bruges for that show, but today we are having a wonderful exhibition in Mo Museum, and director is sitting just in front of me, curated by Charles Esche, Anders Kröger, and Gabriela Ridzevičiūtė, Lithuanian curator, about the meeting of collections that never happened previously, so-called Eastern and Western, Lithuanian museums collection and Varnabe Museum and other collections. So in a way it is the same concept. And listening to the two artists, I think the fact strikes me that the perception of Eastern and Central Europe always stops at the Polish border. Because the real Iron Curtain starts behind that. And the Baltic countries had their own avant-gardes and had intense spiritual and artistic life. Ukrainians had the same, Belarusians had the same. But this was never discovered previously, and only now, after 32 years of the break of the Soviet Union, we start to speak for ourselves, to use our own voices. Because before that, it was the whole gray Soviet territory, and when it collapsed, there was the impression for the West that what they hear is Russian voices. It's it's some Russian culture, which is absolutely not true. And I think the situation today in Ukraine, this horrible genocide and war, is again, trying to erase the voice, trying to erase the culture that wants to speak for itself, and it's not allowed to do that. So I really believe, I really welcome the fact that we are having this discussion further than the Polish border. We have it in the Baltic territory in Lithuania, and probably this means that we will have a larger variety of avant-garde voices and even more intense dialogue. I'm really happy about that.
It's very interesting what you say, because for me it's a little bit paradoxical. Maybe I try to continue what Luc started with, because you speak about avant-garde movements, but our idea of the avant-garde movement is extra-national. It's about universal utopia. And what is interesting in what you say is that you bring it back to the national culture. So it's like national avant-garde somehow. This is what you meant?
Yes, but still talking about avant-garde, we name concrete names which are from the Balkans or Polish names or German. You name George Maciunas, who is a New Yorker avant-garde name, but he was born in my hometown in Kaunas. So in a way, I think we lack perception of the map that is a way larger.
Of the map of the Europe.
Yeah, Rotko was also from Ukraine.
Rotko is from Latvia. Yes.
No, but so now I understand better. You try to enlarge the map of the larger European avant-garde movement, which is, of course, coming from specific nationals, but still aims at a universal horizon.
I would believe this would enrich art history and would enrich the perception of what's what this multi-voice, multifaceted phenomena of contemporary art, avant-garde, dissidency in art, speaking about freedom in art, all those variations. And I'm really happy that our guests visited the Protest Art exhibition yesterday with all the hidden voices, with all the unknown names, but brilliant artists. So I think the story, the history, the narrative still needs to be written further and further on. And it's an interesting venture. It's it's not that I'm complaining, it's the fact. All those geopolitical and art historical steps or moves, it's the status quo, it's the reality. So it's nothing to complain about. It needs to be done. The work still needs to be done.
Yeah, and I also think the irony of the conflict in the Ukraine is that there is now a different attention on a different Europe, in a sense. So this is also kind of a shift in a way. So that might be one of the very few constructive things that can come out of it.
Yes, there is a new focus which was already put an emphasis on in your show in 2010. I would like to maybe continue the line of positivity suggested by K15 and the idea of compassion and forgiveness and remorse represented by the reenacted act of Zlatko following Willy Brandt, and ask you, Luc, about your still life following the events in 9/11. One of the major responses that in contemporary art was suggested by you in Documenta, curated by Okwi and Weather. You presented a gigantic still life that was political in its apolitical nature, let's say. Can you elaborate maybe a little bit about this work?
Yeah, actually my wife and I, Carla, who's actually also an artist, we were in, I had a show in London, she had a show in Chicago, and I think the day of her opening, 9/11, actually happened, so we got stuck in the States. And it was horrible, I mean, because and finally we got home, and then, of course, I know I was invited for the Documenta of Okri and Wezer. And I didn't know, you couldn't do anything about it, I mean, at that point. I mean, it was like, that would have been like ambulance chasing, in a sense. So I was trying to think of something which is the complete opposite of it, which could be perceived as idyllic, in a sense, as a sort of antidote, but also a criticism, and then go for the lowest denominator within painting, which is actually the still life. Also thinking about Cézanne, because Cézanne actually also saw this still life painting, but when he started doing it, nobody did it anymore, because it was a kind of like this void in which you could then actually experiment. Of course, in my case, that was no longer a possibility. But I reminded, having seen a very small painting of Cézanne, which was unfinished, and he painted with lead white, so it turned blue. So that's why the backdrop of my still life, which is supercharged in the sense that it's very big, it takes back in contrast, so it becomes like a chimera, it becomes like a projected image nearly, that you no longer can consume. And so that was my sort of like statement at that point. And also I would say that it's important in art, of course, that whatever propositions you have, the most important thing is the element of understatement. So.
Could I step in about this unrepresentability and this strength of trauma springing from fighting the Nazis, participating in what Nazis did, being a collaborator with Nazis, which happened here in this country and in other countries a lot. Saying forgive us for what we did with Nazism in case of Germany and Willy Brandt in Warsaw. But I still think the other side of story is sort of starting to be told. What Tim Snyder did in his Bloodlands, the US historian, comparing the crimes of Stalinism with those of Nazis. Many people were not happy about that. Many people thought that, okay, fascism is evil. What Stalin did, he won the war against Hitler as period. Did also positive things, of course, did terrible things, but that was inside Soviet territory, so nobody cares about. Mm-hmm. But I think those narratives of colonialism, the narratives of traumas previously not acknowledged, like Stalinist victims, they start to be readdressed anew, which is very important here to understand what happened in Lithuania, what happened in Baltic states, who started the war. Who started the war in Warsaw, in Poland. It was not just Hitler, it was pact between Hitler and Stalin. So all those new perspectives, they are very meaningful today when we see, the unseen, the forgotten extent of violence, of of ceasing to be human and to neglecting the right to be human for other people, neglecting history.
Yeah, but I also think it's not necessary to make a comparison. They're two different things.
Yeah.
And if we talk about the most successful, the most brutal, a person in terms of like that actually died with a stroke in his dacha, then it's Stalin. So Stalin is the ultimate figure of power, more than Adolf Hitler when it comes to that, because he was the structure of it. So those are two different propositions in a sense. And I think that's the difference. I think that's where culture is actually quite interesting, because it sort of like makes another denominator to look at it. And that is actually what you should do. Not so much in a moralizing way, but in a way that it actually sort of opens up these registers that you start to slowly understand. And that I think is quite interesting.
And that you do in your work, because because you touch, you process these events through.
No, but it's very important that things are not moralized, that they are not instrumentalized. That is the danger. Art should never do that. That's what I'm also quite.
It's not recommended in life, So, in art it's stupid. So, coming to the point, just, all this remind me, the situation in our country, which is also, complete trauma, from decades to decades we are jumping, or falling down. First World War, Second World War, this like Homeland War, the period between wars, the period after the war, and now the period before the war, and now the period after the war, And, what is happening? It's happening constant consolidation, which is nice, but you never know. And then you have all that global shit, and you don't know where it's going, So, in my opinion, it's absolutely important, this, as Luc was said, don't be emotional, Think with your head and do your best, And that goes for art too, That goes for art too.
But when it comes to this magnitude of events, this magnitude of traumas, of tragedies, of catastrophes, I think both of you offer something, each in his own way. Both of you offer something like you highlight the power of art by highlighting the weakness of art to confront these events, like the deficiency of art, the idea of painting as something that's
a vehicle. Yeah.
So you, by emphasizing the weakness or the subjugation to it, you tackle it somehow. So it's this kind of, and look, you created a theory of image that is deficient, that is lacking, that is full of holes, and these holes should be filled therefore by analysis, by research, by discourse. And therefore it stirs up a discussion. Some of the work stirred up discussions in contexts that were never stirred up before. Can you say a little bit more about it?
There's of course there's been a lot of writing about my work, and also the idea of the impossibility of the inconceivability of portraying this or that, or the trauma, and so on, so on, so on. And to a point that is correct, but to a point it isn't either. There is an element of perversity in it, which one also should see. The worst form of torture is actually tenderness. So, in a sense, that's, go back to the movie. My father was a dental mechanician. He made false teeth, and when I was 11 I had a hole in my teeth, and he said, "Oh, don't go to the dentist," and he just drilled right through the nerve. And when I saw the Marathon Man, did you know the Marathon Man? Is it safe? Right. Okay. Yeah. So where actually who was the British actor in Dustin Hoffman.
Yes.
And so the British actor, what's his
Laurence
name?
Olivier.
Laurence Olivier, who plays this Nazi who comes from check out the diamonds and all that. And he says to him at a certain point, so when you study history, I'm part of history. So, but this particular scene was like, clung to me, seeing, the experience. So in a sense, I just say this a little bit as a joke, but on the same, it's important that there is, there's even more, like this, there are also things that escape you, by the way. You cannot control everything, luckily.
In your work.
And so I also don't think that's the only structure. I like to paint also. I really like, otherwise I wouldn't do it. So it's also a practice that has a particular meaning. And from where I come from, the reason I come, it has a very particular meaning. So there is this thing that's really important for me.
And Zlatko, maybe you represent, if I take the Eastern European ethos of the avant-garde as a utopian ethos, seeking to celebrating the possibility of art to offer a new image of reality, a new scenario of history, and let's say the Western part, I schematize now, it's a schematic, and the Western ethos is more skeptical and doubtful about the power of art, let's call it like this. Zlatko, I feel you always somewhere in between, because you have this skepticism in your work, or this double meaning, let's say, but also some of the works are representing a true attempt to intervene in the fabric of reality, in the fabric of the museum. We are showing now two works that are two concrete miniatures of MoMA and Tate, but also they follow a work you did right after the end of the wars in Yugoslavia, where you blocked in enforced concrete block the entrance to the Museum of Modern Art in Zagreb. Can you, as a starting point, can you take this work as a starting point in order to reflect on your position with regard to the possibility to intervene in?
Yeah, well, I would say that I have to start, always is personal, I must say that I failed 4 times, on exam to Academy of Fine Art in Zagreb. Okay. I failed 4 times,
Oh.
I was always 7th, 8th, and they're taking 6 guys.
5th time ice cream.
And fifth time I said, just, forget it. I went to Italy and I finished Academy of Fine Art in Venice, and I turned back, and somehow, I don't know, it sounds sick, but seems that I need a constant, like field of war, and I'm in the war, with my society all the time, I was at least, now it's a little bit calmer. And of course, that from personal position, but also from the position as it is, it's far away from good, and institutions and everything, Of course, I literally, made a huge concrete block and I closed the museum. And,
for how long?
I closed the entrance of Museum of Contemporary Art. And, the very morning, guys from papers, they came to me and they asked me at television, why did you make it? I said, that people who are inside are totally lazy, incompetent, etc., and let's keep them out of game at least 10 days,
It was 10 days?
Yeah, it was like 10 days, and we found a way, to keep the work for 10 days. They had, to go and enter the museum, from nearest cafe, it's all building, to break the wall or something, or whatever, It was very nice to watch it. And still, they didn't forget it, which is totally nice, So then, thinking about a larger scale, thinking about museums, etc., you have a situation that, let's be clear, We are speaking about European Union, but European Union, is, 1, 2, second, and in the end you have Balkans, okay, where I'm from. So, I've heard in Germany, I've heard in Belgium, I've heard around, yeah, that's really nice what I'm doing, but we are dealing with Belgian, German, or Austrian, or whatever artists, Our government, our institutions are doing in such a way, And, having situation as it is, etc., it's going like that, But that's also encouraging and empowering, because, you are on the way and path, to do things as you have to do, So, thinking about Tate and MoMA, which are as architecture, beautiful buildings, and beautiful small sculpture, especially, MoMA, when you take it from the context, and also, also with that Nouvel, Jean Nouvel Tower, when he made, it's much more beautiful when you cut it out, than when you watch it in the block, as it is, And so you get a sculpture, and I see it as a sculpture, and I said, okay, the answer is there. So I created new blocks, and I closed museums, and I know, that I made, not very nice favor to myself, but at least I did it, Yeah, that's that.
And also there is, unlike the work in the museum in Zagreb, the work about MoMA and Tate is
it's about positions and power. I always say, it's very clear. There is no discuss. Is egg or a chicken. It is very clear. Artists are those who are creating and putting norm in the world.
I wanted to react to Zlatko's work of putting the piece of iron concrete in front of the museum door and in such a way abstaining for using a museum for 10 days. So this led me to the thought of hygiene and asceticism.
Yes, about purging, let's say, purging, yes. Defunging.
Yeah, I think abstaining, being hygienical about what you use is becoming an urge.
Yeah, also in the context of Zlatko, it was blocking it in the case of a city being bombed also. Huh? So in a way, it's like protecting it also, no?
Yeah, but if I can
put.
I don't think so. No, I think you're radicalizing it. No, it's. I was going to provoke you with a very banal statement that every professor in the Art Academy or in visual studies would say, that since the late 80s, when you were both active as young artists till now, the visual environment has changed dramatically. In late 80s, the owning a computer screen was a luxury. Now every small kid of 5 years has a little screen, and being in this aggressive visual environment. So what is the meaning of producing an image, in this ocean, in this stream, in this tsunami of aggressive images? Did the meaning change somehow?
Well,
because
listen,
it's really what is happening.
The question actually also, when it comes particularly to my medium, which I've always been asked, not by artists, but by art critics or curators, why do you still paint?
Yeah.
And the answer is because I'm not naive. Painting is the first concept of the image, goes back to the caves, whatever you can think of, has a symbolic meaning. And it goes till now, because I'm actually, as we speak, we're working on a project with a friend of mine, which is Luc Tuymans, who actually 40 years ago in Paris started to work with artificial intelligence. Oh. And he and me, because we were proposed to do a project about science, which I don't really like, but okay, I took him. And we're working on it, and to see what the artificial intelligence can do. So we started with, he did the whole show at the Palazzo Grassi, and he just put it into, with 40 people, they're still working on it. And we took just one image that we showed in the Palais Beaux-Arts to just show part of the research and the knowledge graph and whatever. And the very first question was, because the painting is actually a painting that's based loosely on a photograph, it doesn't look like Speer, from Albert Speer, which is an existing document. Now, my question was, can the artificial intelligence find it? It can't. The minute you take a part of an image, although it could be a face, artificial intelligence will find a dog. The point is that it's very good in surveillance, it's very good in appliances. It is pretty bad in terms of creating a sort of signifier. And that is actually what he and I are. He's also working much more from semantics and language. We're not going to make a painting with a computer because that's stupid. They already did that. That's not interesting. And by the way, what came out is that a photograph for artificial intelligence is far more transparent. Painting is too detailed. So if you ask me what is the specificality of painting, it is timing and precision. And it is physical. And therefore, even I do things, although I'm very well prepared and know all the tricks by now, there's still a moment that I do not completely control. And that is exactly what it's about. So that is, and to make an excuse for that, every time people come up with their idea of progress, which is kind of stupid. I mean, I remember the film of Tarkovsky. I had to go to a film of Tarkovsky to see the meaning of Bruegel, me as a Belgian. So that in space you have the commander of the spacecraft, and you see all the paintings of Bruegel in the state. Do you remember that? And that's where he says, you don't go to the universe comes to you. So, and what did Bruegel do? Bruegel worked with proverbs from the Middle Ages. He made quite a political stance, actually, by the way. And translated that into, when my wife and I came back and finally landed, after being stuck in the States for 2 weeks with 9/11, I saw a cut-up billboard with lights behind it of the triumph of the dead, and that was the real apocalyptic image we were looking for. So, even on the sidelines, in the periphery, painting is so embedded that you cannot get that away. I mean, it's like the photograph, the guy that won World Press photograph in 80 whatever, with actually the Balkan situation, where you have I think, I don't know if it's Serbian or Croatian, whatever, a mother with her son who was dead, and he lies here, and he blows it up, and it becomes a pieta. There we go. So that's how things are kind of organized in a way.
So for you, painting is a reflexive...
Painting can be everything. Painting can be a film. Painting can be... It is a... I mean, Da Vinci actually said it was science. Painting is an idea of thinking. If you go back to Van Eyck, and we just take one painting, which is my favorite, the Armofini's, with the convex mirror.
Yes.
And think about it. It traveled. It went to Spain. Velázquez saw it. That many, centuries later. So in a sense, this is the idea of how you open up the world to a certain sense of reality, basically.
You said the word physical, so it's not a real flatness.
Huh?
Painting is not really flat.
For me, as a Belgian, no. And I can tell you why. I mean, if you look at, Alfred Kelly, which I like, Alfred Kelly can use like a color, it becomes a sculptural, and even with him it's different. But painting has a tonality, and tonality is not just the illusion of perspective, it's a tonality. And it creates a real depth within the image. So,
Which is not just optical.
So now it's felt. I mean, first time I saw Caspar David Friedrich, I felt it in my neck. So it's also a feeling.
You mentioned Tarkovsky. Sorry, I jumped to another issue that somehow connects to our exhibition. Zlatko, in K9, that we show in the first room in our show. You used the last scene of Nostalgia, 1983, and Andrei Tarkovsky, the Italian speech. And the image is your disrupted DNA map. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, it's a work I did during my residency in New York, 2003, by Franklin Furness. And I came there exactly with the idea of what I want to make there. But then, I made 2 works, and one of them, second one was the reason that I came to Sao Paulo and reason that I met this guy here, And, or he met me, or we met.
We were both in the same hotel.
We are in the same hotel, And I made very same performance in front of New York Stock Exchange and Guggenheim Museum and a lot of other places,
The UN building.
And then I scrambled it, through software made especially for that. And then I added that speech, prophetic speech from Domenico, from very end of Tarkovsky's Nostalgia. But then that is connected also to one performance I made like years before, which actually was performed by one deaf and blind girl, And that performance, where she comes, in front of auditorium, and there is just podium with very tiny light, falling down on that podium. She comes, she puts surgical gloves, and she had to learn how to speak in the language of gestures, how deaf people are.
Sign language.
How they are speaking and communicating. But with the difference, that they are making sounds too and, faces. And she had a smile, because she's not used to, she never needed it actually. And the text I wrote for her was saying, and speaking about the impossibility of communication, that in the end we don't understand each other at all, Whatever we do, we don't understand it. And there are a lot of experiments, simple and more complicated, which are proving that, So, also in this work here, I started with the point that we understand very often much better when we switch out all our instruments of knowing and understanding. When we are acting, as a monkeys, and reacting as a monkeys. And we are much more, and closer to real something, how it is, than, when we, in general, when we start to think, And it's not idea, to say anything about bad about people and nothing, just it's part of our nature, So, and in the end I saw, this scrambled video, K9, etc., the impact and reactions are rightful, But from the information, you don't have a clue what is the image. And of course that you don't have a clue what the guy is saying. You have to know that Italian, but very good, to understand what he's saying. But sounds as very prophetic speech, which, pump you up, As you said, somebody who doesn't know, Italian, maybe should think that it's Mussolini. No, it isn't, no, it isn't.
I'm not sure I understood, but maybe it means I understood. Maybe we open up the discussion to questions from the...
I have a question for you. Why mercy? Why this term that implies...
Mercy was suggested by Tuymans?
We were in Antwerp, the 3 of us, and we had to think about the title. So we came up with the title Mercy, because of the situation, of course. And also because art is also about compassion, in a sense. I think and generosity. Those things are quite important. Without generosity and all those things, you don't have a culture, basically. You don't have a trade that you can trade for. So this was, it's an ironic, it can also be seen as ironic, to a point, but it just came like that.
Of course there is art is about giving, huh? Art is about giving oneself and receiving, sharing. Okay, questions, remarks? People? Now or never?
If I was sitting in this hall, I would think, oh gosh, it's so complicated to formulate a question.
What do you say? Maybe you ask another question?
I have no idea. I was thinking about that those both artists, they are very intellectual ones, really very well educated. And when, Zlatko, you are saying switch off all your human judgment mechanisms, I think it's a little bit, what to say?
Impossible.
Is that possible? Because
No.
you are playing with references. We are playing with histories. You are playing with so many art historical and political facts. So how does it happen that the product, three-dimensional in your case, this painting or animation in Luc's case, becomes into this intuitive that should affect you somehow in other way, but intellectual and educated?
I will just citate or quote Marina Abramovic when she made work. Art must be beautiful, which means that in certain way it has to be beautiful because it's visual art. You are watching that. And the other thing is that somewhere you have to stop. Because you have to paint another painting, and another, so you have to make another and another work, And then who am I, to impose anybody, how to think, and what to decide, and how to conclude, I can only, through the work, I can address people to think with their own head, or to refuse to think, just to feel, because why did that? Because I wanted to make such an experiment, because, if in piece of art, if there is no experiment which is result of courage, to break your frontiers and to play and to deal with your prejudices and bias, etc., it must be liberating for first, in my own space, I have to liberate myself, to demonstrate to the others, that maybe that's a good way. Yeah.
To answer that question, I had this interview with Hans Ulrich Obrist, and at the end of the thing, you asked the question a little bit like that. I said, well, my dream is actually to completely dement, and then to be able to see the work as if I hadn't made it, So that's probably the solution to the problem.
Yeah.
A paradox.
Yeah. Yeah, but then I must say, after all experiments, I started to paint again 30 years later.
Yeah, right. It's great for dealers, then just keep on painting.
Yeah, I was thinking about this painting dying and dying and dying, first with the cinema, then with the television, finally with internet.
It's not true.
It cannot die. It's like invincible, like Superman.
Yeah, I think it's also because there is a legacy which is quite extreme, which of course that can all change. Things can always change, but I think that the way. I still remember one of my professors saying, and I didn't understand it, so I made something abstract. He said, painting is a way of thinking. And he was actually right. So.
Absolutely.
So you think, sorry, I'm starting to put questions, but I need some answers. Yes. I should be proposing something, but using this unique opportunity to discuss East and West, physicality and abstractness. I was thinking whether our education systems have the necessary elements to form the painting, to form the thinking as related to painting perception. Or maybe the perception tools of the youngest part of the society are already being attuned to different kind of impulses. Flatness, digitality. I know it's too apocalyptic, but I often hear such things. You know, some long time ago I published an article with a question of similar kind, whether our tools of perception are being transformed. Can they be attuned to perceive Van Eyck or Hals or Rubens? But maybe after Nintendo computer games, they start to look for certain other things. This is the question that interested me a lot.
I would say, sorry, I try to offer an hypothesis. For me, art is the realm of the human, and as long as there are humans, there is art. It's about the irreducibility of humanity. And I don't know if humanity will sustain, but as long as it sustains, I think this question should not be raised, because as long as there are people, there is art. But it's a question whether are still people. This is another
Of course
question.
they are.
Yes?
No, I think all the things that, I mean, look at my own evolution. I mean, in a sense, in '95, I started to use Polaroid. Which was interesting because it's quite similar to the way I produce an image. The image is an emulsion, it's not like a photograph, and it appears gradually. It formulates itself gradually. Then I never liked gadgets, but when the iPhone came out with the touchscreen, I needed to have it. So it's incorporated in the toolbox. Looking things on the website, altering things with Photoshop, whatever, drawings, maquettes, all those things you can incorporate into the toolbox. So there is no, I never thought, you can't fight new media because you're not going to win that. So you shouldn't. So in a sense, but you should also not be afraid of it. If I see the work Umwelt from Pierre Wieck, where he goes into a human brain with the neurologists, I did a show in the Serpentine Gallery, and you see in real time what people actually see or experience in their brain as a visual, looking at a car or a bird. For me, that is pictorial. So I don't understand the problem, actually, basically. So.
Great. If there is no one.
Yeah, that's a great. Yeah, Ben?
Maybe Mike would be good.
Okay, so you talked about a term of avant-garde, and you talked about it being as a global phenomenon. Could you elaborate about it a little bit? Because I'm quite not sure. Well, taking Rothko, for example, he was in a specific time, in a specific place, and it was kind of local for New York citizens. But now we see him as the global avant-garde, and my question would be, is it the avant-garde that is global, or is it the marketing?
No, I think it's in the very far end. It's Rothko that actually makes that point, and in especially the works like the Seagram paintings and things like that, where he makes the portal. So, which was also due to travels that he made, but he makes that point single. I mean, I don't think that has to do with him being part of a group. It was influential, it was important, it educated him, it formed him. But in the far end, there are decisions that he made which were quite singular.
Well, my question isn't really specifically about Rothko. Yeah, I'm too close, or?
Yes, a bit too loud.
Okay. Yeah. So my question isn't specifically about Rothko, more about too loud? It's too loud. Okay. Sorry. Yeah.
This is going to be fun.
Yeah, it's more about a group forming in a specific place at a specific time, then that reaches some sort of a global recognition.
Yeah.
and you call it like the creator said, global avant-garde. But isn't it just still local? Just the marketing is.
There you have a point. Of course, one shouldn't also forget that who won the war. I mean, so, and the Americans had a great, fabulous system. I actually proposed it to the European Union, but so they did. The CIA did a covert operation. So they used, without them knowing that, of course, Rothko, and they used Jackson Pollock, and they organized all the big shows in the West. That's how they became, because they won the war, so they also want to win with culture. So this is circumstantial. Lots of things are circumstantial. But this is a very interesting example of that. And actually quite altruistic, although it's malevolent. And, it was, of course, complete manipulation. But therefore not the wrong manipulation, I think. I thought it was really intelligent. So that's in that sense, yeah. But on the other hand, if artists create out of it, and this is something that becomes also a necessity to a point in terms to survive, create a group of artists to work from. There is André Genie, for example, who actually his first plan didn't work, so we had plan B. And then he came back on the scene, which is, and you go to Cluj and you see all the situation. I visited those people. So in a sense, it's about, first of all, it's about a certain element of resistance, you have to be convinced about what you're doing, and then you have to set it through. And global or local, I think those things they change, they're interferential, they are not like static things, like nationalism is not a static thing, so that's actually a dangerous thing in point. And so I think in that sense, art and culture are virtually borderless, and they should be that in a sense.
Yes, I use the word universal, not global, of course. Sorry. No, it has a difference here. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Luc, anything else you want to add?
I'm okay if somebody...
Zlatko? Arūnas?
I'm still not quite okay with this complete universalism,
I'm a romantic person.
I remember looking at Zlatko's picture of 92, this Abraham killing Isaac, and no angel appearing. That's such a Balkan situation, wouldn't you think?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's before he kills him, huh?
I would say, I was thinking about Caravaggio, and I was thinking about Caravaggio and Solzhenitsyn at the same time, which is a very interesting combination. First,
Of course, I think it's important that.
And its imagination is crazy, How can you connect things and which kind of things putting together, and make a totally new story, or see everything, I would say, in rightful way, but you are witnessing, you are consolidating, etc., etc. So through your colleagues, artists, through one writer and philosopher, etc. So just in that time, when the war started by us, because some of my works are, of course, I was in that time young artist, and really totally mad and angry about the situation. And just I read, in that time I read this beautiful essay from Solzhenitsyn, The Lack of Courage, which is actually regarded the lack of courage of Europe, especially, France and British England, who permitted, to Hitler and Germany to annex Sudet and Anschluss of Austria, okay? And finally they reacted when Hitler, after he promised that he'll not do that, he attacked Poland, Then they declared the war. So the essay speaking about that lack of courage to react in the right moment, you know, like half a year before. Yeah. And actually the act of Chamberlain, who was seeking for the peace, etc., together with King George, you know, who were very happy, you know, with that agreement, and explaining to the people, you know, just to say, you know, that it was happened first time and never, you know, that on same balcony was, you know, Prime Minister and the King, you know. So our situation was, you know, that nobody helped us. You know, I'm not complaining and comparing situations, you know, today and, you know, that time, but we had embargo and everything, and we felt that down, that nobody understands us and nobody gives us support, you know. So, you know, what else, you know, than to take a fucking, you know, sacrifice of Isaac, you know. But of course, you know, angel is, I mean, it doesn't exist in such a situation. It's just frozen moment of you are waiting for the sign, but the sign constantly is not coming, you know. So, yeah.
That's a great ending. Hopeful and pessimistic at the same time.
And let's have mercy.
Well,
No, because he doesn't come, but he also doesn't come.
Yes, but you know, our colleague, you know, what was his name, Mike Kelly, you know, he put out one beautiful word, you know, for you know, to explain what art is. You know, the art has to have that something uncanny, you know, something, you know, that you can't even explain, you know, it's somewhere in between, you know, yeah.
I just remembered one of the last exhibitions I saw. It was in Brooklyn Museum on Andy Warhol, and actually on a very unknown feature that he had. He was a deeply religious person, and as a gay person suffering that Mother Church could not accept him completely as he was. So I thought, wow, you know, seeing Warhol as this universal avant-garde figure playing with pop culture images, and now discovering this very strange and very specific feature that he probably brought from Czechoslovakia, you know, this part of himself.
I have to say, I had a lot of problems with Warhol before I understood it, until I saw a show in Babur, a retrospective, and I came out and I think black is really important for Warhol. I mean, the whole idea of the authority of print. And of course, then you go into the absolute. I mean, you get through religion to a point. I mean, without the Russian icon, you don't have the square of Malevich, so of course not. So, I mean, so these are sort of things, you know. Yeah. But I think it's important to drive that away from the whole identity politics, because that's not really a great idea. Because, so in a sense, it's important when it's actually works in a sense that it's constructive. It's not like a statement. It's more than that, you know. And that is, I think, that he also meant with universal. Yes. So the things can. Also coming back to the question that the young artist phoned with the global and the local. These are things that are interference, and they can only be positive. They only become negative when they become statements and when they become no longer dynamic. I mean, that they sort of... And maybe that's an answer to your question, I don't know.
Yes, and you said many times, me as a Belgian.
Well, of course, yeah, why not?
And me as a Croatian can say, you know.
We don't take it too
seriously. Yeah. But Luc said one very important thing, construction. You know, it is about constructions. And until recently, you know, my works, you know, K1, 2, you know, the K is for construction. Because I realized time ago that that is the only title I can impose to my works, because all that is construction, it's artificial, but you know it's pulled from the life, you know, and personal experience. Yeah.
Okay.
Ori, how do you think about that as an ending?
That's an amazing.
Me as a Belgian, me as
No,
Croatian,
please,
me as
Luc, say
Lithuanian,
something. You know,
but-
I don't know.
But
I don't
don't
want
take
my-
it too seriously. Don't take it too
That's
seriously.
the end.
That's
After the end, it's amazing.
my only friend.
Thank you, Arūnas. Thank you, Zlatko. Thank you, Luc. Thank you,
you.
guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.